When I came back in the office, I was shocked to learn that this weekend, the biggest story, frenzied social media rumors speculating whether Donald Trump had died. For the record, Donald Trump is very much alive, okay? And no, we like our president.
And I think that they are going to be very surprised. I'm talking about the Trump people and the MAGA nation by what's going to happen on Tuesday. Not only do I feel, to answer your question 10 minutes later, that I feel the same way that I felt a few weeks ago that Trump is toast. Absolutely.
President Trump, a man who never tires of painting himself as untouchable, finds himself cornered by the sharp wit of Stephen Colbert and the relentless scrutiny of Michael Moore. The president imagines himself as larger than life, but Colbert and Moore expose how the empire is held together with fragile myths and exaggerated tales. Their roast doesn't simply lampoon him, it dissects his every performance until the illusion shatters under the weight of ridicule.
Trump made the announcement during an Oval Office event yesterday where he added insult to invasion.
Chicago is a hellhole right now.
How dare you, sir? Chicago is not a hellhole right now. Chicago is not a hellhole until February. Then it is a sub-zero windswept vista of frozen Lake Michigan.
Colbert dives first, slicing into President Trump's obsession with image. He reduces the grandeur to a caricature, showing how the constant bragging turns triumphs into caricatures. Every gesture of strength becomes a skit. Every attempt at gravitas becomes a comedy routine waiting for a punchline. The president, who thrives on spectacle, suddenly becomes the spectacle itself. Colbert highlights how even the smallest slip turns into headline comedy because the act was never built on substance.
Donald Trump is very much alive, and this whole crazy rumor started simply because Trump had 0 events on his schedule Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, and one of the only signs that he might still be around was music in the Rose Garden, which the White House confirmed was the president's music. Which I gotta say is not the strongest proof of love.
If you're enjoying this video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Moore joins the barrage with his documentarian precision, taking apart the mythology of President Trump's business empire. He reframes the story not as one of daring genius, but of inherited safety nets and repeated bailouts. The skyscrapers that bear his name are not monuments of brilliance, but reminders of a brand propped up by endless reinvention. Moore underscores how the myth of triumph is less about success and more about marketing a persona that never matched reality.
Well, I think that the system has already been blown up for me. He has completely destroyed the Republican Party. In my film, John Boehner, the former Speaker of the House, Republican, said there is no Republican Party anymore. It's called the Trump Party. And there is really no Democratic Party anymore because the Democrats are completely impotent and incapable of getting somebody.
Colbert emphasizes the chaos orbiting President Trump. He mocks the revolving door of staffers, framing it as a sitcom where cast members are fired before the credits roll. Moore digs deeper, portraying the instability as intentional, a strategy to ensure nothing ever settles long enough to invite accountability. The disorder, once painted as unconventional leadership, is revealed as constant turbulence with no direction.
Yesterday, Trump also posted, "Chicago is the worst and most dangerous city in the world by far." Worst and most dangerous? 2 words. You.
Moore presses the humor further, pointing at President Trump's endless rallies. What are billed as moments of national unity become stand-up routines centered on self-applause. The chanting crowds, the exaggerated promises, the rehearsed grievances, Colbert reimagines them as comedy festivals masquerading as politics. The spectacle is never about solutions. It is always about keeping the lights on stage and the applause meter high.
The way that what you just played here, I hadn't heard Trump utter those words. I'd heard somebody say that he said them, but to hear him say that about they can shoot through the media, the assassins, go ahead and fire, and all those other things you just played, it's like they really believe that the average normal American wants to hear.
Colbert, by contrast, drives into the consequences of this performance. He reframes President Trump's speeches as a deliberate drowning of truth beneath repetition. By flooding the public with exaggerations, Moore argues, the president transforms fact-checking into an impossible task. What might look like missteps are revealed instead as calculated strategies designed to keep the narrative so noisy that truth itself loses clarity.
Because yesterday, Donald Trump made a hard right onto the fascism freeway, announcing that he will deploy National Guard troops to Chicago. Our brave... Yes, boo. Our brave soldiers are not supposed to be wandering around Americans.
Both destroyers converge on President Trump's combative relationship with the media. Colbert laughs at the contradiction. A man addicted to attention, yet perpetually outraged by coverage. He frames the constant brawls with journalists as the behavior of someone who cannot survive without both adoration and enemies. Moore pushes the critique further, suggesting that undermining reporters isn't just habit, it's a tactic to weaken oversight. Together, they reveal how President Trump treats scrutiny as a personal affront rather than a democratic necessity. Colbert sharpens his edge against President Trump's claims of moral authority. He juxtaposes lofty declarations of values with scandals trailing behind like shadows. The gap between rhetoric and reality becomes a comedic goldmine, exposing how easily contradictions are brushed aside as long as the performance continues. Moore amplifies this, reframing it as a calculated gamble. Repeat the language of virtue often enough, and hope the echoes outlast the evidence.
Country, and to talk about immigrants in this vicious, vile way, where and you think of all the things that we have and we've given the world, and the anger and hatred toward Muslims and Arabs. Steve Jobs. I mean, this never gets discussed. Maybe I'm just a trivia nerd, but he's born of Muslim parents. His parents were Arab, and they put him up for adoption. They had to put him up for adoption, and was adopted by the Jobs family.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be talking to you maybe on this device right now in this way without this offspring of a Muslim or
President Trump's restless need for accolades provides another point of convergence. Colbert ridicules the late-night outbursts online where grievances spill across social media like a diary written in real time. Moore reframes them as a revealing pattern. The president cannot bear silence, cannot stand irrelevance, and must always insert himself into the conversation. What seems impulsive is shown as compulsion, where the need for constant visibility defines the man more than policy or principle. Together, Colbert and Moore create a portrait of President Trump not as the strongman he imagines, but as a performer obsessed with the stage. Colbert wraps every flaw in humor sharp enough to sting, while Moore strips away the performance to reveal how hollow the core has always been. The result is a dual assault, one voice laughing at the absurdities, the other revealing the machinery of manipulation. By the time they're done, the image of invincibility is reduced to fragments, leaving only the spectacle of a man who can never escape his own performance.
Trump is concerned with something he finds far more dangerous than disease.
Big ugly windmills, they ruin your neighborhood.
The windmills that don't work when you need them.
The windmills are driving the whales crazy, obviously.
Do you want to see a bird cemetery? Just go under a windmill.
You want to see a bird cemetery? You want to see a bird widow in her veil crying over the casket? An open casket. I don't know why they made that choice. It looks like a mess.
Stephen Colbert takes the momentum and focuses his lens on President Trump's addiction to legacy. He frames the president's yearning for statues and textbook chapters as desperation, a quest for permanence in a world that sees only spectacle. The monuments Trump imagines are not triumphs of leadership, but symbols of hubris, destined to be studied less as greatness and more as cautionary tales. Moore emphasizes that history remembers patterns, and the pattern here is endless self-promotion disguised as governance. Colbert picks up the thread with comedic venom, mocking the way President Trump talks about achievements as though they were unmatched, while the reality often reveals blunders cloaked in exaggeration. He highlights how the president declares victories before battles are even fought, treating every minor step as proof of unmatched brilliance. Colbert reframes the routine as a magician revealing tricks too obvious for anyone to fall for, except the performer himself. Moore returns to the economic mythos. He illustrates how President Trump's supposed brilliance in finance relied on loopholes, protection from collapse, and a gift for rebranding failure as resilience. The skyscrapers, golf courses, and casinos morph under Moore's analysis into monuments of debt and overreach. Far from being an architect of prosperity, the president is shown as a man who survives not by genius, but by constant reinvention of the same old act.
Oh, there's a fun little story from the Smile File. Donald Trump became the first former president to go on criminal trial. We'll get there. We got an idea. The official name of the trial is the people of the state of New York versus Donald Trump. The people of the state of New York, that's us. Okay, hold on. I know you're excited, but don't cheer too loud. We need you to get picked for jury duty.
Moore keeps the humor flowing by mocking Trump's addiction to conflict. He imagines the president waking each day in search of new feuds, be it with politicians, athletes, or entertainers. Every quarrel is framed as a battlefield, but Colbert reframes it as a carnival where the barker thrives on shouting matches. Instead of looking like a statesman, the president resembles a contestant in a never-ending shouting competition. Moore then dismantles Trump's approach to crises. Natural disasters, economic shocks, or global conflicts all become opportunities for him to spotlight himself rather than address the issue. Moore reframes these episodes as staged press conferences masquerading as leadership. Instead of comfort or direction, what the public receives is chest thumping, as if branding could substitute for resolution. Colbert cuts in to highlight Trump's endless need for affirmation. The way he surrounds himself with praise, craves applause, and demands loyalty is depicted as less strength and more fragility. Colbert reframes the White House not as a seat of power, but as a comedy club where the president insists on being the headliner every night. The laughter may be canned, but the desperation for it never fades.
Oh, even more so. I just keep wondering the gift that the Trump campaign keeps giving us. I don't think they really are in touch with where the majority of Americans are at. The majority of Americans do not.
Colbert brings the critique back to governance. He underscores how Trump's tenure blurred the line between political responsibility and personal branding. Policies were rolled out like marketing campaigns, slogans substituted for substance, and photo ops replaced progress. Moore reframes the presidency not as an institution of leadership, but as a stage commandeered for a single man's show. The audience may have been the nation, but the script was written for one ego alone. Colbert amplifies the contradictions. The man who railed against elites leaned on them at every turn. The outsider who claimed to topple the establishment depended on its very structure to function. Colbert exposes the irony with humor sharp enough to pierce the bravado. Trump's rebellion against the system looks less like revolution and more like redecoration. Loud wallpaper over the same old walls. Moore highlights how the quest to look powerful often produced the opposite, reducing stability while amplifying noise. Colbert keeps hammering the theme of noise. Every policy announcement is reframed as a one-night-only event, where headlines mattered more than results. He paints the image of Trump holding press conferences like a stand-up special, basking in cameras, then abandoning the details the moment attention shifted elsewhere. The show never ends because the content never mattered. Only the spotlight did. Moore concludes his portion by zooming out. He reframes Trump not as a leader who shaped history, but as a character who hijacked it, replacing governance with theater. The constant need for visibility, the endless cycle of spectacle, and the refusal to step out of the role become the defining traits of his presidency. For Moore, this is not legacy, but warning. The story of a man who never stopped acting long enough to lead. Colbert closes with sharp laughter that cuts deeper than applause. He reframes Trump's years in power not as a reign of strength, but as the longest-running sketch comedy, where the main actor never realized the joke was on him. What was meant to be history instead became parody, and what was intended as dominance became the punchline.
Trump has hated windmills. Trump has hated windmills ever since 2011 when he unsuccessfully tried to stop an offshore wind farm from being built near one of his Scottish golf courses. Now he's taking his revenge. This week, the White House ordered its agencies to escalate the fight against offshore wind. Yes, the fight against wind has begun. Mimes of America, assemble.
Together, Colbert and Moore leave the roast not as a flurry of jokes or critiques, but as a demolition. One wields humor like a scalpel, the other wields analysis like a hammer, and together they dismantle the myth of President Trump piece by piece. What remains is not the towering figure he envisioned, but the spectacle of a man addicted to performance, forever chasing applause that fades the moment the lights go down. Colbert sharpens his delivery by zeroing in on President Trump's habit of turning personal grudges into national talking points. He reframes every insult hurled at rivals as evidence of a man who cannot separate private resentment from public responsibility. The office appears less like a seat of authority and more like a stage for endless quarrels. Moore builds on this by dissecting the theatrical nature of Trump's policymaking. Initiatives that were announced with flair often dissolved before they reached implementation, leaving only headlines behind. Moore reframes this cycle as a deliberate pattern. Grand declarations create the illusion of progress, while the lack of results is conveniently forgotten amid the next announcement. Substance is overshadowed by spectacle, and the churn of publicity takes precedence over measurable outcomes. Colbert takes a jab at President Trump's inflated self-image. He ridicules the constant insistence on superlatives, mocking how every action is branded as the greatest, the biggest, the most incredible. The exaggerations pile so high that the claims collapse under their own weight, leaving a comedic vacuum where credibility should stand. Colbert emphasizes how the obsession with self-aggrandizement has turned the presidency into a parody of excess. Moore delivers his counterweight by examining the broader consequences of this success. He reframes the pursuit of constant self-promotion as corrosive, pointing out how it weakened trust in institutions and left allies wary of commitments. The hunger for applause distorted decision-making, making the preservation of image more important than the pursuit of solutions. In Moore's framing, the showman's drive for spotlight undermined the very foundation of governance.